Uh, well, Geoff, Greg, thanks for coming on to do this. Obviously,
Absolutely.
my channel's Done Golfing on YouTube, and
Okay.
it's all for charity. It's raising money for Macmillan, Help the Heroes, and Shelter. So we've got quite a few questions coming from subscribers. I don't know if you want to start off though and just give us a little introduction to yourself and the background, because obviously I bumped feeds with you on Facebook, and from there we decided to do this. So
Yeah. So my background is fairly, I guess you'd say it's an unusual one. I left college early to play pro soccer for 5 years, and then was not particularly enthused about the general state of affairs in soccer. So I decided to go back and get my degree, and absolutely fell in love with golf. I'd never played when I was a kid, but when I went back to get my degree, I had some people around me that played, and I just fell in love with it. And 6 years later, I was playing on the mini tours. And unfortunately, that career didn't last very long. I got a back injury, so I started teaching. And I really, really enjoyed the teaching side of it. But I always felt like both, and I also ski raced when I was a kid, but I always felt like in all the sports I played, I had more physical talent than I was able to access. So I was always looking into different ways to try to sharpen up the mental game and deal with the issues with not kind of reaching my goals. And so I started working with my golf clients. I actually got my PGA Class A in 1996 and started teaching full-time at Torrey Pines in San Diego, and just found over the years that I was able to have a much stronger effect on all of my clients by helping them with their mental game as opposed to just helping them with their swing. So that's kind of where it got started. And then it's really evolved from there. I also do Tai Chi, and in my pursuit of Tai Chi and also in personal meditation, I discovered some devices that allowed you to actually see what's going on in your brain with your brain waves while you're doing things. And that really opened up a whole new door, because basically up to that point, it was all, sports psychology is kind of gray, fuzzy area, right? It's different for every person. It's hard to tell what's going on. But once I discovered that there was some really simple brain science, that if I could help people learn to recognize that, then it made it much easier to be able to relate it to different people in different situations. So yeah. To make a long story short, basically what I found is that a lot of the things that I felt like held me back from where I wanted to get to in all the sports I played, I can now turn around and help people with that, just because there's some science behind it. So I try to combine a little bit of brain science with a little bit of psychology, and then how that relates to the physiology. And that's kind of what makes what I do maybe a little bit unique relative to most sports performance guys.
Yeah. That kind of ties in, obviously, with the whole kind of improvement thing that we've got going on our channel. And the take I've got on it is reading old books from the likes of Sam Snead and Ben Hogan, Henry Cotton, and there are a lot of chapters in those books about how they kept their minds on the job and quiet, and everyone, the buzzwords from a couple of years back, you used to always hear commentators on the television always talking about the zone, the zone and this, that and the next thing. And Nick Faldo commented, I think, not too long ago, and he'll be obviously doing the Masters again this week. Obviously the Masters is on, and all these professionals that are out there, the whole aspect of keeping your mind quiet but also concentrating at the same time, obviously that is not an easy thing to do. It's like the fight run thing, where the primeval, if you're scared, you're going to fight or run. So your body's naturally not happy if you're under stress. So how do you manage that, or what's your tips, I suppose, because that was one of the questions that you can do, because that is I think golf is one of the hardest sports to play, because the average round, if you look at the PGA for example, 5 hours, 5.5 hours.
Yeah. So the big picture for golf is really pretty simple. You mentioned the word the zone. Well, the research tells us that the zone is a very specific frequency rate for your brain. So the big picture of what I do with golfers is I help them learn what that frequency rate feels like for them and build it into their pre-shot routine. So you can't maintain it for 5 hours, right? Nobody can do that. But it's relatively simple if we go through the right process to help people. Even if they don't get into the zone for every shot, if they're getting close, then the really bad shots where you're not committed and where the emotions are too strong or your thoughts are wandering a little bit, that starts to go away. So the frustration of hitting the really bad shots goes away once you learn how to move your brain to the right area. So it doesn't have to be perfect, just needs to be close. And the basics of the way it works is pretty simple. The closer your brain is to being almost asleep, the better you perform. So the more active your brain waves are, the closer you are to that fight or flight, and the more difficult it is to perform. So one of the first things that I try to help my golfers recognize is there's the difference between focusing with the thinking part of your brain and focusing with your senses. Because when you go to perform, you have to focus with your senses, your eyes, your ears, your body, your spatial awareness. If you don't recognize that focusing with your cognitive brain, the thinking part of your brain, is absolutely the wrong thing. It turns on all the wrong systems in your body to perform. It actually puts you closer to fight or flight when you try to concentrate with the thinking or the analyzing side of your brain.
Yeah, and there's been some great tricks. The one that springs to mind is Fuzzy Zoeller when, obviously I'm trying to keep things on the Masters, but when he won the Masters, Fuzzy, even his caddy commented, he says, I don't know what the guy does, he just walks off and he's whistling. And he would walk up fairways whistling away to himself, and he would just say 9 iron, and then he'd start whistling again. And it's something, like you say, to distract you, but a lot of times I try and imagine an actual light switch. Now, I don't know why that pops into my mind, but I switch off and on, and I know a lot of people struggle with that, but I've always been able to do it. So when I play a round of golf that's 5 hours long, I'm not burning myself out after 9 holes. I'm on, off. And it does take a bit of training to be able to switch yourself on and off, though.
Absolutely.
I think, though, having a caddy must help, because you've got someone to sort of bounce off a little, and if they see your body language getting a bit tense, then they can draw you back a bit, or you would like to hope so anyway.
Yeah, what you mentioned as far as the whistling, that's actually that's a trick that I use with a lot of my golfers who have trouble stopping thinking. If you hum out loud and you're listening to the hum, so you can just hum out loud and it doesn't make any difference, but if you hum out loud while you're swinging and you listen to the hum, the thinking part of your brain shuts down. So they're different parts of the brain. So when you're using sound and listening to sound, the thinking part goes away. And again, you only need to do that for 5 seconds for every shot. In between shots, you want to try to relax and save energy and enjoy yourself as much as you can.
Smell the flowers and all the rest of it. It's easier said. One thing that seems to have crept into modern golf as well that I've noticed, maybe you can throw some light on it. I know the players now stand over the line and they're feeling the weight on their feet, and you were talking about senses there.
Yep.
And you can pick up a lot with through your feet and through the ground, but I think players like myself as well, walking up a fairway, never mind on the green trying to work out a break, you can actually feel the ground if you're going to have an uphill shot or a downhill shot. And I think if you're like going to someone like yourself and getting some coaching through basically the psychology of how to get positive thoughts in and try and chip away at any negative stuff, it's the the balance between everything that you can do practically with the mechanical side, and then blending it in to that player's actual game, and the improvements you would see, and they must be huge, eh?
Oh, it's so fun. It's absolutely, the being able to kind of the essence of it is, and sounds like you have a little bit of a natural gift for it. You have to be able to turn down the dial of thoughts and turn up the dial of sensory information. So the more sensory that you are, the more you're feeling and seeing and hearing, the more you're turning on the performance systems in your body. It's like when you go to write your signature, you're not thinking about what your knuckles do, what your wrist does, what your elbow does. You're either picturing the signature or you're feeling the flow of the signature, and then you just let it happen. And the same, even though the golf swing is more complex than a signature, the principle is the same. One of the challenges and one of the fun things for me is every golfer is different, and every golfer needs to find, right before you pull the trigger, do you have more trust when you're turning on the switch of visual senses or when you're turning on the switch of feel senses? Because it's never 50-50 and it's never 100% zero. But knowing that ahead of time, and just as an example, when I'm hitting a drive, I'm always about 90% feel and only about 10% visual. And when I hit a putt, it's just the opposite. So just knowing that makes such a big difference for all my clients when they get on the course, because the trust level is higher. Number one, when you're using senses instead of using thoughts, but also if you're using the right senses that you trust the most.
Yeah. I think your blend of the pre-shot routine where you're feeling the weight of the club. I think that is a missed opportunity for most golfers, because either they strangle the living daylights out the club and that cancels out the weight and the feel in the hand, and then from there tension creeps in. Now that obviously is one of the biggest swing killers in golf. But when you've your background as well from the likes of the other sports that you played in, baseball and things like that as well, I don't know what it is about golf psychologically that amateurs struggle, and pros don't really struggle with this, but amateurs, they get a card in their hand and they're on the back tees for a medal or a competition, and they can play great golf if they don't have a card in their hand. But as soon as they get that card in their hand, it's like a big massive weight on their shoulders. And I know from my subscribers that they can struggle with that.
The pros struggle with it as well. It's just that the degree is not as big, so it's not as evident. So, the pros don't play as well as on Sunday as they do on Thursday. The stroke averages are different. So we're humans, so we still feel the same things. And this is kind of the second phase of working with athletes, is teaching them to recognize the difference between when you're performing, are you focused on the process or are you focused on the result? Because the more you're focused on the result, the more pressure you feel. And, most amateur golfers don't have a coach telling them, hey, you know what, you need to be paying attention to where you are, what you're doing, what the shot is that you want. So the gap between their best shots and their worst shots is much bigger. The pros experience the same thing, but the gap is a lot smaller.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember who said it. Probably loads of people have said it, but you're only as good as your worst shot or bad shot.
Yep.
And obviously,
absolutely.
If your margin of errors can be, that's a bad shot, but still on the green, whereas you could have a bad shot and be 20 yards off. But yeah, we've got a few. That kind of covers one or two of the questions that we got asked. Obviously, like me, you'll be glued to the TV watching the Masters.
Absolutely.
This is kind of not really psychology, but when you're placing a bet on golf, and normally I only do it on the majors, obviously you're looking for players and such like. So I'll tell you my two picks that I've got this week. And the first one is Sergio Garcia, mainly because I know he's not showing much form, but he has won. And I think going round, it's going to be really fast greens, tough conditions. It's going to have to be a good ball striker primarily. And after watching the women amateurs that played round it, I couldn't believe how difficult, and they all putt really well. They really struggled on the greens. And my other choice is Rory Mcelroy. And I've been getting terrible blooming abuse for picking Rory Mcelroy. Everyone says absolutely no chance. He will never. But listen, you be able to clarify this. These guys are that good, right? What's the difference between them having just 4 good days, and that's you a major winner for life? They'll never be able to take that away from you. So,
yeah.
You know, I admire people like Ian Poulter, who some say, you know, is so, he comes across as being a bit arrogant, on the arrogant scale, but confidence-wise, he's got more confidence in his bag than probably even DJ, you know, Dustin Johnson has, before he tees it up. It might not go all to plan, but that kind of attitude, as long as you don't let it get carried away, it can carry you a long way, can't it? Rather than having that kind of fall back type. You've got to have the balance between like attack and defence on the golf course, or in any sport, and look for the opportunity. But I think that's where the likes of yourself, anyone who's doing the mental game, this can improve a player just by, you know, discussing different tactics and how to keep yourself in the moment.
Yeah, as far as for a particularly big event like the Masters, to me, there's 2 sides of it. What's the level of self-belief that player has at that time? And then how does the course fit that player's skill set? Right? So there's the internal control is if the player says, you know what, I'm in really good form right now, and this course also suits my game, then you're looking at somebody who's not going to be feeling pressure. They're going to be looking forward to going out and showing how good they can do. But if there's little chinks in the self-belief, so the self-belief is the core. Confidence is kind of up at the top of that. Confidence comes and goes day to day, shot to shot. But the self-belief is something that's a little bit stronger. It's what's underneath the confidence. So if somebody's coming in to the Masters and their self-belief is very strong, and the shots that are the critical shots for the course are the ones that the player has good self-belief that fits their wheelhouse, that's a good place to put your money. And unfortunately, I mean, I love Rory. I think he is one of the best people and personalities out there, and he's great for the game. But his weakness in his game is he has very poor distance control with his short irons, and that's not a good match for Augusta. So his driving puts him in terrific places, and his short game has gotten much better. But when you can't control exactly how far your wedges and your 9 irons and your 8 irons go, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that driver as much as you can. Now, hopefully I'm completely wrong and he proves us all wrong. I would love to see him win it.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, if you look at Sergio, he has terrific control over how far he hits his irons. His iron ball striking, he's probably been one of the best ball strikers with the irons for 20 years. His challenge is he has very low self-belief on short, fast putts. So that's another challenge as far as Augusta goes. And Poulter's an interesting one because he has, when it's him against somebody else in a match play situation, his self-belief is as strong as anybody that's ever played the game. But when it's just him against the course or him against the field, he's a different player. So so his psychology is all geared around, he loves that. He should have been a footballer, or he should have been somewhere where you're competing one like a boxer or something, because that's his psychology is really geared to defeating the person that he's playing. He's not as good when it's him against the course. But his short game and his putting fits Augusta perfectly. So you never know.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, the talk is all about Bryson again. And, I watched, I don't know if you saw it, there was the range clip where Bryson's bombing the driver and the trackman's obviously there. Did you see the Vijay Singh just standing there going, Yeah, okay. It was a funny moment because he was like standing going, yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he just does that type of thing. He's never going to swing like that on the golf course. He's just doing it to intimidate, I think, more than anything. He's like a prize fighter now, isn't he? Strutting his stuff.
He loves attention. That's one of his. So he's a very talented athlete and he's a really bright guy, but psychologically he craves being in the limelight. So anything that he can do to be different and be in the limelight and be special, he's going to do it. That's where he wants to be. The problem with that is if you're not feeling great when you're in the limelight, like in Augusta in November, you just crumble because he put the expectation out that, oh yeah, this is a par 67 course for me, but he wasn't quite ready for it. So when you're feeling good, like last year in the U.S. Open, he knew he had an edge and he knew he was in a good place. He's going to run and hide, but there will be situations where you're going to struggle because he loves that attention so much.
Yeah. I've got to ask you about Brooks Kepka as well, because obviously up until this point, I would say, Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, major winners we're talking, and Brooks is right. It just seems to be every time there's a major. Obviously, he had a blown knee. I don't know how he'll be this week. But how's he got that? He's got that mentality and that drive, and I don't think that'll ever go from him. You can see it in how he plays every shot. It's a totally different way than any other professional I've ever seen. How he thinks. Like you can see, he's just got this different, and he doesn't play in anything much before a major. Very much like Jack Nicklaus takes a couple of weeks off, then he tees it up, and it's like game time. But that's not an easy thing to do. That's going back to the on-off psychology, but that's really off because you're not like playing your way into a major. You're just turning up, teeing up. It's not everyone can do that.
There's a balance because if you play too many tournaments, you're going to have a lot more failures under your belt, so it's going to erode your self-belief. Right? So if you're playing like Tiger at his best, he was only playing 18 to 20 tournaments a year because he knew he would be prepared to either win or play really well. So that allows you to keep your self-belief high and your trust and your confidence high because you're not failing as much. It's really hard to fool yourself that, if you go through a 4 or 5 week phase where you don't play well in 2 or 3 tournaments, it's hard to keep your self-belief and your trust up without being artificial with yourself. And I think, to me, one of the things that Brooks has really mastered, which is something really important from the psychological side, is he probably has the best self-talk of any golfer in the world. And when I say self-talk, what I mean is the little voice inside your head going, either you're really good or you're really bad. Well, he's trained himself to constantly just keep telling himself how good he is. I'm better than everybody else. I'm really good at the majors. And anybody can do that, but he's taken it to a really, really high level. Even when it's not necessarily warranted, it's not artificial. He really believes it.
Yeah, it's really... So, for the subscribers out there, because we've been asked this question, and obviously it ties in, right, practice-wise, obviously, most people just hit golf balls. But, from your point of view, and I read the comments... from Ben Hogan when he had his major accident, that he used to lie in his bed while he was bedbound, but he used to play around the golf, just lying there, and he would hit every single shot. So is there anything that we could maybe work on when we're not at the course? Because obviously, I don't know what it's like for you, but COVID-19 over here is still... we're in Scotland, it's a bit of half of a lockdown and we're edging out the lockdown. Not everyone's been able to practice. So what can we do, even 2 or 3 little tips that we can improve our mental game? Because even the likes of myself, I can struggle from time to time. And there's always something that brings you back, but it's finding it, isn't it?
So this is where the science of the brain can really help us a lot. And this is actually one of my favorite parts of working with my clients, because one of the hardest things is making a change or doing something new that you've never done before, like going to a new situation where you haven't succeeded and being able to succeed, or making a change to how your mind works. Well, the fastest way to do that is not at the range. It's actually using your visualization skills in your mind, because of the research science of both what your brain waves are doing, but also what all the different parts of the brain are doing, show that when you visualize something strongly enough to where you can see the colors and you can hear sounds and you can feel the feelings, so that it becomes, instead of visualization, it's more realization. So you make it as real as possible. Your brain actually sends electrical impulses to your muscles, so you can retrain your muscles at home with your eyes closed if you get good enough at those visualization skills. So seeing yourself succeed in really challenging, like if you've got a really troublesome shot at a particular golf course, if you visualize yourself strongly succeeding in that, then you're actually rewiring how you're going to handle that when you get to it. Or even physical changes. When I try to make a change to my own swing, I spend 10 days visualizing it every day without touching a club, so that it's clear in my mind, and I've already sent some of those impulses to my muscles ahead of time. Yeah. So everybody's heard the term visualization, and you see players before they hit a shot, they're visualizing the shot shape. But when you can close your eyes and you recreate a situation in your mind, your muscles don't actually know the difference of whether you're performing the movement or not performing the movement if you visualize it strongly enough.
Well, that is good to know, because obviously I'm trying to change my swing and stuff, and people always talk about muscle memory. But
no such thing. It's actually, muscle memory is a myth.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that. But what's the difference psychology-wise? This has always interested me, but I've never really had a great answer. Learning to ride a bike, it's not easy, obviously, and you fall off loads of times, and then all of a sudden, you're up and you're away, and you have no clue how you did it, right? You can actually, 25, 30 years later, jump on a bike and you're off again. How come, $1 million question, how come golf can't be like that? I mean, it's just, I don't know.
So this is where it's really fun for me to be able to, I go and do speaking engagements and talk with clubs and teams. The reason why it's so much harder to learn the golf swing is because of what's going on in our brain. When you're a kid, until you get to the age of 7, your brain is dominated by theta brainwaves. And we don't need to do any pop quizzes or anything, but your fastest learning occurs when you're in the theta brainwave frequency. That's why kids up to the age of 7 can learn things super, super fast, because the brainwave state that is dominant until you're age 7 makes it easy to pick things up. As you become an adult, your brainwaves move up to theta, and then up to alpha, and then up to beta. And beta is a terrible place to learn movement skills. It's a great place to analyze things and reason things and be logical and think about things. But learning always happens fastest back in that theta state. So here again, if you can learn to meditate and get your brain waves down in the theta state, and then you can visualize super strongly, you can become that 7-year-old and learn things much quicker than you do as an adult.
Yeah.
So big part of my job is helping people recognize, number one, okay, how do I visualize something that strongly? And number two, how do I make sure my brain is in the correct receptive state so I get the most bang for the buck for that visualization?
That is brilliant, because obviously I know that I can vastly improve my thought patterns and whatnot. It's been great having you on. I don't want to keep you too long. Obviously, you're on Facebook. I'm going to link that in. And where else can people look you up? I
have a website, and there's a lot of great, I have a lot of blog posts on the website and videos and just just basic explanations of what I do. And the website's really simple. It's just my two initials, ggzap.com. So www.ggzap.com.
Right. Thanks very much, Geoff. And I think if we can maybe get you back on in about, I don't know, a couple of months' time, once we've got, I think this video, when it goes out, it'll generate a lot of interest and also get a lot of chat on the subscribers. And it'd be good to revisit it after, because just with you saying that there about visualization away from the course, everybody's got 5 or 10 minutes here and there. And if we quieten our minds and think about internally what we want to do, I tell you, I'm going to try it, because if that works, I can see how, I can think about things in other aspects of life before I go and do it. So why shouldn't I be doing that with golf? And I think we could all be doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I tell all my clients. If you're doing it strongly enough and you're fully into it, when you're doing it, it only takes 5 or 10 minutes a day, and you can totally change things around in just a few weeks. And if some of your listeners are do-it-yourselfers, I actually have a course that takes you from A to Z. So you can, all these things that we talked about, you walk yourself right through it. And, I'd be happy to give your listeners a big discount on the course if they want to do it themselves. But I would love to come back on and chat with you again anytime.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Thanks very much for coming on. And I'll let you know when it goes live, so you can catch up.
And I'll definitely link to it on my Facebook and on my webpage as well.
Okay, Geoff. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.